Well, Faco, tell us, I'd like to hear just a little bit maybe about yourself to get us rolling here. How did you come to the Web3 space? And then how did karpatkey, come to be, and maybe a bit about the origin there?
Yeah, I did a lot of things before Web3. I studied BA at the University of Buenos Aires. My first job was back in 2004 at a big American contact center. There I learned how to code in VBA and started liking automations. I automated most of my work as an analyst, so my workload went from 10 to 2 hours. I was studying back then at university. Since I was idle 8 hours a day, I got promoted a few times. I ended up leading the deployment of a global workforce management software for over 45,000 employees in 18 countries. After that, I got a scholarship at the University of Bologna in Italy. And I went there, studied, I got my master's degree in international relations, nothing to do with my bachelor in business. At the beginning, it was quite stressful because I didn't speak Italian. I just applied and I didn't expect I would get it. But it was a mind-blowing experience. The food was amazing in Italy. I traveled across Europe. I met Marce there, karpatkey's co-founder, at a bar in Barcelona back in 2009. And then I moved to Chile, a neighboring country. I worked at Groupon as the customer service manager for LATAM. I ramped up from 12 to 120 workers. I created this staffing system in Excel because we had no budget to pay several $100,000 to buy a professional staffing service. And well, eventually we got decent metrics and customer satisfaction was pretty good. And then after I left Groupon, I worked as the operations director at a startup in the wine industry. We sold business intelligence to the wine producers. I took care of CRM there. Then I lived in Paraguay. I was the head of operations of a telecommunications company until one day I found a scorpion in my room on the 11th floor. And I freaked out because I had never seen one. I Googled it and it was the most poisonous species in the world. So the next day, I had a hard time sleeping after that. The next day I got this job offer in the email from Avature, a CRM and ATS software company focused on HR. And so I finished my contract, left Paraguay, worked there for several years as a consultant. Then I got hired by an Austrian company deploying Workday, which was another HR software. I took care of project management, deployment, setup, etc. in different countries. And karpatkey back then was starting to grow. I got contacted a few times by our co-founders, by Marce and Ale, to join them. They had a lot on their plate. They needed people they could trust that could help. And well, they eventually convinced me and I gave a 2-month notice and left. And back then, crypto was a hobby for me. I always found it to be fascinating. I never expected to be working in the industry, and I was thrilled to become part of it. And regarding karpatkey, the early days, it all began with Marcel working for Gnosis. Before Gnosis became a DAO, he was taking care of the investment strategy. And after Gnosis became a DAO, the job became more complex. So he associated with Dale, our co-founder, and they founded karpatkey, a spin-off of Gnosis. And I think back then becoming independent was a good idea to eliminate the bias that belonging to an organization brings to and allowing them to make more objective financial decisions too. So that's the origin of karpatkey at the very early days.
Very cool. Well, I'm sort of taking notes on what you're sharing here, and I noticed an interesting point of overlap. I'm sort of a geopolitics nerd myself, grew up outside of DC and did some work in IR before coming to crypto myself. So maybe we can have I always thought a geopolitics and crypto podcast would be interesting. I don't know how many people are interested in that stuff, but it's interesting.
Wow, that would be something. Yeah, I've never heard of one. Yeah.
And it seems like you spent quite a long time in the CRM space and really across the world, really.
Yeah, it was quite a journey.
Very interesting. Well, and the karpatkey you are based out of Spain and Europe, largely speaking, yes.
Yeah, we have people in different countries. We have people in Argentina, Germany, India. We are currently growing as well. We have very a significant amount of open positions that we tweet about too. But we try to be as decentralized as possible, to cover as many time zones as we can. We have a person in Singapore as well, and growing.
Very cool. And for For folks that are either with us here live or listening after the fact that may not have heard of Karpatkey before, sort of one of my contentions is Karpatkey is obviously growing in sort of the industry mindshare, but is one of the, if not the most important player that fewer people have heard of, and I was sort of flying under the radar a bit here. So what is the TLDR on Karpatkey for someone who's listening now and doesn't have any prior knowledge?
Well, we, as I mentioned, we began handling only the Gnosis DAO treasury. Then, we were just focusing on our job and making our best without chasing yield, because the goal of Karpatkey is to allow DAOs to focus on their core business and let Karpatkey take care of all the investments of the tokens and making sure there's enough liquidity available whenever they need it. That's what we were doing for Gnosis. And we found an independent research from Autonolas that said that 53% of the yield of all major DAOs, of like the 60 biggest DAOs in the space, 53% belong to Gnosis, which is the one we were taking care of. So we didn't believe that at first, so we double checked the information, we checked the blockchain, and we were surprised to find that was the case. There's a big opportunity there with the DAO treasuries that many times are idle, just sitting there. And we try to get the most out of them for the DAO. Firstly, make sure that the DAO has enough liquidity that they can face their obligations. And then with the idle funds, sign a strategy and allow them to generate some yield that can be an additional source of income for the DAOs and other organizations.
I got it. And ultimately, Karpatkey has been managing treasury assets for the Gnosis DAO for a little over a year now, right? Since I guess the end of Q4 of 21. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started working on September 2020 with them, but yeah, there were a couple GIPs. Even though it started back in September 2020, the GIP 20 was the formal kickoff of Karpatkey as a service provider for Gnosis DAO, leading its treasury development, the strategies in a trust minimized way, the way we do it today. Back then we didn't have Zodiac, now we do. Now I will explain what it is afterwards. So it went pretty well. The treasury goals were to fund the development of Gnosis DAO products, new ventures, boost GNOS, the token of Gnosis value proposition. And back in the bull market, we were getting a yield of around $1.5 million a week, which was amazing. And the number and complexity of the positions grew significantly to reduce the risk, increasing the diversification, just in case any of those positions got hacked or compromised in any way. And then there was a second GIP that we posted, the GIP 58. That one took the scope of Karpatkey to the next level, focusing mainly in the growth of the Gnosis chain in alignment with Gnosis goals, as I was mentioning. And we actively supported also emerging projects, bootstrapping liquidity, managing rewards to make them more appealing, providing them with specialized feedback on token allocation. We also significantly increased the capital efficiency by developing automations in-house. We have a tech team that actually develops, they did the DeFi protocols package, for example, in Python to query the blockchain directly through several nodes in a very fast way that allows our bots to give us early alerts in a fast manner, and so we get it instantly and we are able to act accordingly. If there's any unexpected market downturn, we can have an emergency meeting and de-risk the positions, for example. We focused a lot on security. We have a security protocol for the execution meetings. It was audited by a third party. And we also created the risk management area, like formally within Karpatkey, and it grew significantly too. We have a matrix with 32 different parameters that are constantly being monitored in an automated way. All the ones that can be automated, some of them need a person checking the market. We also took care of GNO market making across different networks. We maintained bridges, we maintained routers. We also participated in some cross-DAO governance and worked on partnerships with other protocols such as Balancer and Maker on behalf of Gnosis.
That's a lot. There's a lot of there.
Yeah.
So I just want to, yeah, fantastic. I jotted down a couple things as I'm listening to you to share here about specifically. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about how Karpatkey goes about sort of risk management when it comes to smart contracts and these inherent sort of risks that I guess are unique to the industry in some sense.
Well, the smart contracts need to have been released like a significant time ago. We generally do not trust smart contracts that went live in production like a couple months ago. It's maybe too early. We make sure that they have been properly audited by reputable third-party auditors that, of course, haven't been hacked. There's this notorious wrecked list where you can see all the smart contracts that were hacked and who audited them. So that's important. And then, we're constantly researching and attentive to how the market evolves. And whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's an event that is unexpected, we do like a post-mortem analysis afterwards, and we see which parameters would we have been looking at to prevent anything like capital loss, for example, which likely has never happened to us. But we definitely have learned several lessons along these few years, and we afterwards formally monitor like any variables. Like, for example, if there's a pool and you have a participation there, and whale enters the pool, let's say that whale concentrates 30% of the tokens, then it might be a good idea to preventively exit the pool, because if the whale does it first, you would have a significant slippage afterwards. So like that, there's a significant number of other variables that are checked by the risk management team.
Got it. Yeah, and I can imagine, this last year has been a wild ride, I guess, for all of us. You mentioned, during the bull phase, as high as 1.5 million a week, which is absolutely incredible. How since the market has changed over the last year, and maybe even more recently in the last couple of months, maybe how has Karpatkey changed its strategy in terms of TM activities?
So we have a strategy team that works on the strategies at least once a week, twice a week. We publish every week, like, which was the strategy that was implemented. We always do it exposed to prevent front running, for example. And we're currently working on a dashboard that is soon to be going live, where all the positions will be available in a public link. But how it's changed lately, I'm not on top of the strategy, to tell you the truth. I'm focusing on business development. I can tell you a few that I remember worked very well back in the day, like carry trade with DAI and MakerDAO. We staked Ether in Lido, wrapped the staked Ether, use it in Maker to borrow DAI, and then that's used in positions in pools in different protocols like Curve, for example, or Uniswap v3 for supplying GNO, because part of our work is market making. So we supply GNO, we can concentrate liquidity and have greater capital efficiency with the third version of Uniswap to supply that GNO liquidity in the market, containing price variations, reducing impermanent loss. But the granular detail can be found in our weekly reports that we tweet every week.
I would definitely draw everybody to the Karpatkey Twitter page. And if you are here in the Discord with us here in the Gen Chat, I've also dropped a PDF of the slides for today, as well as a link to an important blog article I think it's worth taking a look at from Karpatkey, sort of a high-level overview of building the future of asset management. And yeah, I mean, these reports, whether it's for Gnosis, Balancer, ENS, I know that these are coming out on a regular basis over Twitter. So if you're listening to what we're talking about and what Facu's sharing, and are interested in sort of nerding out on the details, definitely head over to Twitter, follow Karpatkey, and take a look at some of those reports. I shifting back to asset management, this recent I just got to ask you your thoughts, maybe personal or otherwise, with regards to the USDC DPEG, right? Just for context, one of the DAOs I've contributed at for a while is Shapeshift, and they have a team that does in-house treasury management activities, and they've been on it for quite a long time. And we're all celebrating, of course, well, not celebrating the events around FTX, but celebrating the fact that DAOs that had their assets on chain were sort of unaffected by the larger events, only to then experience this DPEG event of what most people consider to be a gold standard in stablecoins. So just maybe what were your thoughts around that? Maybe some of Karpatkey's learnings or insights in the postmortem around the USDC DPEG.
Yeah, well, that kept us on the edge of our seat. We were monitoring the crypto Twitter. We were checking the market, the dashboards. Our conclusion was that no action should be taken because USDC would recover the peg. We came to this conclusion a few hours after the depeg took place. And, we advised the DAOs we work with to follow that path, to just hold it and wait for it to recover. Because the reaction of the market was, in my personal opinion, exaggerated. Like it went down in a greater percentage than the deposits in Silicon Valley Bank explained, and also the DAI peg was lost, as if DAI were back to had a 1-to-1 ratio on USDC as a backup, which is not the case. So it was a matter of time before people came to their senses and the panic, dissolved and the peg returned, which is what eventually happened.
Yes. Yes, well, and that's, I guess, the ability to provide that sound advice is a big part of the value that Karpatkey brings to its partners. And I'm curious to hear, so it sort of grew out of Gnosis DAO beginning back in 2020, I guess formalized in 21. And since that time, Karpatkey has grown significantly, obviously, and brought Balancer, ENS, and CowSwap under its umbrella. So maybe could you help tell the story there a little bit about how that growth occurred and sort of what are some of the changes that have happened at the organizational level as you've taken on these new partners?
Yeah, well, once we partnered with Zodiac, and we were able to use their technology to publish a strategy, get an approval from it, and then be able to operate in a sort of trust minimus way and without custody in a non-custodial way. That enabled us to be able to participate in the request for proposal from ENS. So we were one of the bidders. It was a tough process with a lot of queries from the broader community. And well, eventually we were chosen. It was a hard process with the ranked choice voting in Snapshot. Afterwards, we were heavy users of Balancer, and we proposed, we talked to them, explained what we did. We thought there was a good match between what we could do for them and their needs. And well, we published the proposal, and we were elected to take care of their treasury as well. And finally, CowSwap, we've been working with CowSwap from the day it was born. They are also a Gnosis spin-off, so we're sort of like family in a way. And again, we knew them very well, very closely. We understood their needs, their pain points, and it was sort of a perfect match. They just focus on what they do best, and they're growing significantly, and I think they have a lot of potential. And they let us take care of what we do best, invest their tokens and get the most out of it, make sure they have enough liquidity to face all their obligations. And so far, so good. Everybody's happy so far.
That's great to hear. I don't know, do you have any sort of big wins or stories that you'd care to share about any of these projects, either in terms of the run-up to election or big wins in terms of Karpatkey's work with their treasury over the last year, or I guess in the case of ENS and Balance over the last couple of months here?
Yeah, well, the ENS process was particularly time-consuming, and it demanded for everybody in the team to dedicate a lot of time and analyze the needs of ENS. I actually had to create at one point where the results were no longer being shown. I created this spreadsheet that would calculate without code the actual results, so that we could follow it. It was pretty exciting, actually, like a football match. So after, we created these videos explaining what we were doing, we improved the proposal with a second post. It wasn't just a regular process where you just post a proposal, then it goes to the second phase in Snapshot or whatever governance process the DAO uses, and then you are chosen or not. This was a multi-step process with a lot of technical questions, and I am very proud of how all the teams at Karpatkey worked together to reach that goal. It was amazing.
And so now you must have obviously teams that are dedicated to each of these partners, or so how does Karpatkey pursue its treasury management activities with ENS and Balancer?
Yeah, so yes, we do have dedicated teams that work jointly with their teams. So the idea of Karpatkey, one of the ways in which we work with other DAOs is working jointly with the people who are already managing, the treasury in-house, giving them all our tools, all our expertise, our advice, our infrastructure, the risk management, because it's really hard to manage a treasury in-house. To begin with, you are biased because you're part of the organization. And then there are just too many variables to look at, and just one or two people cannot do it. You need a full team. You need people who are focusing on reporting, people who are watching the market virtually 24/7, and you need a lot of risk management. That's something that has grown in the last year. It's grown amazingly. I even lost track of what we are currently like the nitty-gritty of what we're currently monitoring, because the matrix is growing and it requires like ad hoc developments on the automations to be able to monitor everything. So it's very difficult for a single person to do that. And I always say that this is a humbling job, because every day you start from scratch. The strategy which worked yesterday might no longer be valid today, so you have to every day reassess and make sure that all the positions are still the best option for the DAO. It's extremely time consuming, and you need people who do it professionally if you want to do it properly.
Well, I think the fact that you've not experienced those contract losses, et cetera, I think is a great testament to the seriousness and dedication of the team, clearly. And the case of Balancer, I imagine that the relationship that emerged between Karpatkey and the project also helped lead to their decision to deploy on Gnosis chain, which I know is a new announcement here and very exciting.
Yeah, we were really happy about that. Yeah. Amazing.
So this is something I know I spoke with Dash about as well. I know Uniswap has also been approved to deploy on-chain here. And is this something that we can expect in the next quarter or two? Or when do we think? I mean, it'd be great to see Balancer and Uni, obviously, both on Gnosis chain.
Yeah, we're trying to, help with everything we can to make it happen as soon as possible. If I told you a date, I would be lying. I'm not positive about that. But we always provide all the help we can give for that to take place, for the deployments to take place, because we align with the vision of the DAOs we work with. We are like the financial arm and do whatever we can from our standpoint to help reach their goals, and growing the Gnosis chain is probably the most important goal right now for Gnosis DAO.
Let me ask you though, obviously this show is designed to feature projects building in and around Gnosis chain. What are some of the things that you see coming down the pike for Gnosis chain, or what keeps you bullish on Gnosis chain and really motivates you to do that work to bring attention and new projects into the ecosystem?
They are one of the most important OGs. There's a lot of potential. I think the culture inside Gnosis is amazing. When you go to Lisbon, when you go to their offices, if you go to the hub they built in Berlin, where all the developers go create things, people are motivated. There's a vibrant atmosphere with people working really hard, but at the same time having a good time. Gnosis leadership is very open, very enthusiastic about what they do. And I think they are very, very aligned with the ethos of DeFi as an industry. They are all for credible neutrality. They were very concerned when validators were rejecting transactions that were involved with Tornado Cash, but that was not the way the whole system was meant to work originally. And I think in that sense, they always stuck to their principles and did their best to work to follow the ethos of the industry with all their resources. And at the same time, I think they are pretty good curators. The projects that they select, many of them have been very successful, like Safe, for example, CowSwap. So I think Gnosis has an amazing potential in the industry.
Yeah, totally. And it's a privilege to do this show, I'd say, because I have the opportunity to speak with awesome people like yourself and others that are really building new things and coming up with new solutions for real problems in and around Gnosis chain. So one of the things I know you mentioned earlier is that Karpatkey is also increasingly involved, I guess, in sort of cross DAO governance activities. I want to draw you out a little more on that and hear what you're all up to.
Yeah, well, we created this proposal, for example, the BFF, the Best Friends Forever proposal with Maker, for instance, and, to create this partnership between Gnosis DAO and Maker DAO, and worked diligently to have GNO onboarded as collateral, which eventually happened, and we were very, very happy about. So yeah, we advocate for the DAOs that we work with in the governance forums of other DAOs. Whenever we see an opportunity of collaboration, we are all for it. There's a lot of synergy between the DAOs. They are like slow-moving creatures, but when they work jointly, their reach, their breadth goes above and beyond what they could be achieving on their own, as individual DAOs. So you see the CowSwap solvers working in Balancer, these technologies, when they work as a whole, they can achieve a lot more than independently.
Well, it's clear Karpatkey is positioned to be a great broker and connector between DAOs. What are some of the, I guess, I don't know if you can share any of the alpha. Are there any other DAOs in the industry that Karpatkey may be partnering with in the near future and sort of bringing into this coordination?
Yeah, certainly there are. We are currently ramping up. We are growing, the number of collaborators, and once we are ready to take on more DAOs, we'll look into that in more detail, and I'll be able to give you more information, because we still need to get more headcount to be able to keep growing at the same pace. And not only that, but people need to be properly trained. They need to have enough experience to be able to take on more partnerships.
Understand. So scaling,
Yeah.
you're underway. I will say, if folks are interested in all the conversation that's happening here, Karpatkey is definitely hiring. They get a list of job openings there. I don't know if you wanted to draw attention to any position in particular, but folks, if you're interested and if you're technical on things and want to throw your hat in the ring, perhaps take a look at their website. So I want to shift a little bit, and I'm based in the U.S., for example, and there's been all sorts of regulatory noises happening over here, to the extent of people sort of with their hair on fire talking about unbanking crypto and all this. I'm just curious to hear your personal opinion, maybe on where things might be headed. I feel like if the U.S. takes really aggressive action, that things will just more or less shift over to where perhaps Karpatkey is already based out of in Europe. But how are you and Karpatkey looking at the regulatory space these days?
That's something I found particularly concerning. I think that all of us as an industry need to do a better job building bridges with policymakers, because they're in the dark many times. We need to help them understand what we do and where we are going, and shed light over DeFi as a whole. Because the more they know us, the less likely it'll be for them to take radical actions that could severely affect our industry. And DeFi has enormous potential. It allows millions of people to have access to financial services, to credit, to improve their quality of life. But unfortunately, all that potential can also be used by malicious actors. And I'm a big fan of decentralization, trustlessness, censorship resistance. But I would also like to have someone to resort to in case someone ever steals my funds or organizes a sophisticated scam that I fall for, like a con artist or on an organization that does that for a living. And that's the police role of the state, and we need to give them tools to exercise that role, which they currently don't have, or they don't have enough. So if we find a middle ground that includes the national states in the equation, we could help them create legislation that would allow Web3 to thrive and reach its potential, without the risk of being declared unlawful overnight.
I think that's very wise. I find that a lot of folks in the industry are less interested in and or familiar with policy making. And so there's more of a tendency to assume malintent rather than sort of what you are suggesting, which is that it's more likely that they're in the dark and simply haven't been as educated and informed about the issues when they make certain regulatory decisions.
Yeah. It's hard for them as outsiders, as for anyone, to understand what's going on exactly. And also it's an industry that is moving so fast that it needs like interpreters, people who are inside and can work as intermediate agents.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I certainly hope, we have some, think tank oriented, I guess, influence, lobbyist groups in the DC area, but they're few and understaffed. I don't know what the situation is like in Europe, but the industry relies on a very small number of people to sort of make the case. And so hopefully, I know some resources have been pointed in that direction, whether it's the DeFi Education Fund or other initiatives. But it's definitely something I'm keeping an eye on too here, particularly as an American.
Cool. Yeah.
What would you say, I guess, if we're looking forward here to the rest of this year and into the future, where will Karpatkey be in a couple of years from now, and sort of what are its aspirations for the future?
Well, we'll definitely keep improving our risk management skills. They are by definition never enough, and minimize the manual workload. We need to increase capital efficiency through automations. And we are working to abstract the complexity of our service to create a product that can be used by treasury managers, not only from DAOs, but also from institutions and retail. And so all of them would be able to use the infrastructure and the specialized tools that we are creating. So that's our vision 3-5 years from now.
Very interesting. So you're in the process right now of developing a product that would enable, would it be sort of expert level, but folks outside of Karpatkey to adopt these tools for their own treasury management purposes?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And the more user friendly, the better.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, and I want to be a little bit mindful of time here. I know it's almost 3/4 of the way through the hour, and anybody who is here in the Discord who has questions, feel free to drop them in the show chat here in the voice channel. There's already a number of links there relevant to Karpatkey and their work. So if anybody has questions, feel free to drop them there. Dosh, if you would like to hop in as well, just feel free here. I've got a few more things that I'd like to chat with Faco about, but I just want to put that in the pipeline there, make sure that people are thinking along those lines, and we'll try to just keep the conversation rolling here.
Yeah, my only question is, T-Wills, when are you going to apply for those openings for Karpatkey? Because definitely want to see you around this ecosystem. Sorry, Eric, but yeah, it'd be great to see you more on a permanent basis since this is the last DAOcast.
Hey, we'll see. Things are in motion, perhaps. I do not know. There's a number, Faku, that you threw out earlier that I just want to revisit, which is, you say 53% of all DAO assets or on-chain assets are with Gnosis?
Of the yield, yeah, that was an analysis made back in the bull market, and so from the entire yield that every single DAO made, 53% belonged to Gnosis DAO.
I got it. That's a pretty astounding figure. How does
we were not seeing the rest? We were just focusing really hard on Gnosis. So at first we didn't think that was possible because it was like too much. But they are like not. They are underutilized. There's a lot of opportunities that are being missed by just holding the assets there, and which is why we are ramping up and trying to offer service to other organizations that would start getting yield out of their idle funds and making sure they have enough runway to be sustainable in the very long term.
I mean, these are very standard types of things in the legacy space. It's interesting how much how the industry imitates legacy finance in some ways, but then not in others. What are some of the reasons that you've discovered in conversation with DAOs why they might not be? I imagine many are aware of the opportunity, but they may not be taking advantage of treasury management strategies. Is it mostly because they don't feel confident in doing so, or what have your discovery been there?
Well, DAOs in general are not agile with their decisions, so they could make some token allocations that are predictable in very large protocols. But if your funds as a DAO are all locked in a smart contract, and the only way to move them to execute transactions is by having 51% of the votes or 50 plus 1% of the votes, then you cannot do it, because sometimes you need to be very agile. Sometimes minutes count in the market. So what some of them do is after they come to a conclusion, they just deploy some of the funds in very, very simple strategies that at least yield something. That's better than nothing, of course. Also, there's like many of the contributors of the participants in the DAOs do not come from a finance background. And there's maybe a significant amount of knowledge that you need to have if you want to do it properly. I'm not saying that somebody without a financial background cannot invest their tokens. That's actually not true, but it's a lot better if you have that background because your understanding is much better, like how the systems work, what are the best opportunities, and you also need significant technical knowledge because finance alone is not enough. You need to analyze how sound the alternatives are, and that complexity maybe is something that a specialized team should tackle. Like DAOs as a whole, with a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds with an opinion, have a hard time making the specific technical decisions on how to allocate their funds. So I think that explains why most of their funds are idle, because they were not designed to focus on their treasury. They were designed to focus on their mission and vision, which is generally a lot less boring than just investment finance,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that there obviously are these simple strategies that DAOs can pursue, but they're not going to see the types of results that they might like unless they have that professional hand at the wheel that Karpatkey can provide.
Yeah, and also there's all this risk aversion, because if things go south, then it's it gets complicated in DAOs. Sure. So yeah,
it makes total sense to a project like Karpatkey to handle those specific technicals. I see some familiar faces here also in the audience, and Billy, Jim. And if folks again have any questions, feel free to drop them in the show chat, and we can ask Faco here before the top of the hour. I guess I would wrap up here, at least personally, to try just pointing people again to the blog that was linked to within the show chat here. And there's a sentence, Faco, that I pulled and shared in the show notes there that I wanted to draw you out on, maybe a big picture conversation to conclude here. But in the blog, Karpatkey writes, DeFi will reshape the structure of modern finance and create a new landscape for entrepreneurship by broadening financial inclusion and encouraging permissionless innovation. There's a lot of pieces there, but I really like this, and I guess I would just love to hear your reflection on maybe the big picture of where the future of DeFi is headed, and the value of this inclusion and permissionlessness.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important benefits of DeFi, that it allows anybody with a phone and an internet connection to be included in finance. There are several million people that are out of the system, and that's even bad for TradFi, because the more people out of the system, the worse overall for the actors that are currently inside. I come from Argentina, where a growing number of people are being left out of the system, and that's just a lose-lose situation, because maybe you're doing great and you're, you're managing, you have your bank account, your investments, etc. But then you go, I don't know, to a restaurant, and you get there's somebody approaching you, asking you for money and food, and good luck having an enjoyable meal like that. So it's really a great opportunity with this technology that we have to get an overall improvement of the quality of life of a lot of people who currently don't have access, and also the composability, like the potential that it has, is so much wider than traditional finance, because the technology or the concepts just didn't exist back then. So finance just worked the way it could with the technology it had for centuries. But now it gets supercharged with all these alternatives that allow to do exactly the same that you were doing before, but with a lot more potential and reach. And on top of that, bringing you more alternatives like flash loans. There are a lot of things that can only take place in DeFi, and where the technology is going is hard to tell. But as long as we keep the governments updated, and we give them enough tools to be comfortable, and to rest assured that we will not operate outside of the law, I think we can reach, if we have their collaboration, the government's collaboration, I think it's actually limitless, that this can actually be the next standard, that eventually the only finance that will exist will be decentralized.
That's a great future to envision there. Obviously, a lot of work to be done between here and there, particularly on that policy side. And maybe we can chat in the future about policy and geopolitics, man. Fun conversation. Do you still keep up with sort of world events, obviously? And you got a lot on your plate with Karpatkey, I'm sure.
Well, maybe some, in Sundays, during Sundays sometimes, but I'm all the time reading about DeFi and Web3, because it's endless. We need to keep up to date, and that consumes most of my time together with the kids.
Of course. Well, look, I don't want to take any more of your time today. It looks like we got a clean chat there, and I've learned a lot and really enjoyed our time speaking today, Faco. Thank you very much for joining us.
Same here. Thank you for your time. Really interesting interview.
Well, last call for questions here. Otherwise, I will say good GM, Faco, and so folks, stay tuned. Make sure to follow Karpatkey on Twitter. Check out their mirror blog posts and some of the other links here in the chat. And once again, GM Faco.
Cool. Thank you very much, T-Wills. We'll keep in touch.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye. Have a nice one.
Thanks, T-Wills. Thanks, Paco. See you guys.